Hi, and welcome everybody to this session number 4 of Revenue Hacks. So today we're going to be talking about business travelers and domestic market together with those 5 beautiful ladies. So I'll let them introduce themselves. And we have a special guest actually today, Carla, coming from SiteMinder. Christina, maybe you want to start?
Hi, everybody. My name is Christina. I am JMK Group's Revenue Manager between the UK and Ireland. Hope you're all well today.
Olga?
Thank you. My name is Olga Soma. I'm a revenue management specialist and a consultant. Thank you very much.
Suzanne?
Hi, I'm Suzanne Williams. I'm the Revenue and Systems Director for a marketing agency in Cheltenham. Back to you.
I'm Benedicta. I'm the founder of a sales consultancy for the hospitality and for technology companies.
Cara, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, thank you for having me. It's fantastic to be here. I'm Carla Brooklyn. I'm currently Global Vice President for our enterprise organization at SiteMinder. And SiteMinder, just in case any of you don't know, are a channel management provider that work in the distribution space for hotels.
Great, thank you very much. And I'm B, so I'm managing MyOT, which is a consulting company helping hotels optimize their revenue. Great, thank you all for joining today. So maybe we're going to share a little agenda to give you an idea of what topics we're going to talk about, help you think about it. So first, we're going to talk about RFP season for 2021, then move on into more of the corporate rates and the structures, talk about the various distribution channels and role of sales in the next few months. This is, a little bit of your session also, so please feel free to put some comments, whether you're on YouTube or on LinkedIn. We'll try to, of course, to answer as long as the chat is going through. So maybe we can start with talking about the RFP season. There's been quite a big news last week from GBTA. They have announced that hotels should postpone the 2020 RFP season. So that was quite a bombshell into the industry. They've also encouraged hotels to roll their rates toward 2021. Any thought about that? Carla, maybe you can give us shed some light there a little bit.
Sure. So I think to date, the RFP process has been an exceptionally formal process. Every year as we kind of enter in July, August into September, we start to complete realms of forms, and it's a very structured process. I think this year what we're going to see is not necessarily that we don't do RFP season, but it will be a much more informal process. It will be a case of us identifying the key partners and buyers that we want to be working with next year, understanding the needs of those businesses when they're going to be traveling. And I think, instead of rolling rates, like has been suggested, I think from my perspective, it's more around trying to delay that process as long as possible. And it's not a delaying tactic from a hotel perspective to try and gain more from their rates for next year. It's just both the buyer and the supplier understanding what are the right rates for their businesses for next year. And also we just physically can't roll rates when we don't know what's going to be happening with events for next year as well. So I think that's probably where I would start is I think we're just going to see a very different buying dynamic from the RFP process, much more informal than what we've seen to date.
Okay, are the buyers giving you any insights actually of their thoughts for what's going to come in August and September?
I think like much of the industry and much of the world right now, we're still waiting to see what happens in the coming weeks and months. Businesses are certainly not in a position quite yet to even think around what their trading cadence will be as we come into the Q3 and Q4 of this year. I think what we know is that there's going to be an increased focus on cost management and creating cost efficiency. So when we talk about business travel and then RFP, I think it's going to be more around the decisions that businesses and those travelers have to make around whether or not they will be traveling next year, when they will be traveling, what's deemed essential and what's deemed not essential, kind of keeping people in policy as much as possible to make sure they're managing their risk against kind of cost and making sure they're managing cost really well. But in terms of RFP, definitely no indications yet on when they feel that they're going to be prepared for that discussion.
Okay. Thank you. Is it something that you can see already or that you're discussing in the hotels? Maybe Christina, Olga?
So for me at the moment, pretty much everything is kind of rolling over from last year. There's been a conversation about group RFPs as well. You know, tour companies are looking to revert back to 2019's rates rather than have 2020 for 2021, which, to be honest with you, we've been kind of quite fair with. Corporate wise, we are looking at stuff. There's still RFPs coming in, believe it or not, which is interesting. But there's a lot of they're more global ones rather than just the individual ones at the moment. We have seen a lot of corporates come back to us asking to renegotiate, or these are people who have felt that they want to have a better rate themselves rather than going through the big chains and the big channels, because they like to have that one-to-one conversation with the revenue manager who sits in the property or the reservation person who sits in the property. I think the biggest focus in this coming year for us will be that personal relationship and how you can make it more personalized for the guest and not actually for the clients. And I think that's one way for revenue managers who are almost like commercial leaders within a property who have no sales team. It's a great way for them now to start rebuilding a relationship or establishing new ones and getting out there, meeting these people, buying a box of donuts, buying something nice, bringing them a notebook and getting that business with them.
Do you think that means that there's opportunity then for independent hotels to maybe muscle in where the brands have dominated in the past? I mean, it's a real opportunity.
I do think so. Funny enough, when I was out walking today, I was thinking of the next thing, the next step, because we have brands and we've got independent hotels, and what we can do to try and push them independent hotels a lot more, because they only went on GDS last year. They were never on GDS in all the time that we actually operated beforehand. So, you know, it's interesting to see that we're able to make these small improvements to be able to push the hotel a lot more, to be able to try and gain a greater market share, especially in the likes of the Kensington area or around Hammersmith area, where there's a lot of big companies, a lot of big businesses and new buildings going up every day.
Do you feel that the corporate buyers are going to put a lot of pressure and are going to demand proofs on the hygiene protocol and how the hotels have been clean and so on? Is there a risk for them to go directly to the chains, which have been quite vocal on how, like Accor or Hilton, how they're going to deliver the new standards? How do you feel as an independent hotel you're going to be able to showcase what's a new protocol you put in place? Because I feel that's going to be really the big demand from the larger corporations.
Well, funny enough, yesterday we had a big conversation with all our GMs about going forward, the new operations. So we're putting together a big new SOP document on cleanliness and hygiene, and also how to deal with COVID-19 as a pandemic or any other virus that comes out of this. In that we'll cover, it's almost like a hierarchy of command, and also how we can deal with it in general. We're looking at introducing some sort of certification. I know that a lot of the governments are doing the same as well. We've been in touch with our hygiene companies and our cleaning companies as well, who do that, because some of our business is outsourced, of course. So we're kind of getting certs together with them as well. So, you know, there's a lot of work that's been done in the background. I have to say the team that we have been exceptional. And what's interesting is the GMs came up with their own ideas. You know, we've had GMs who've been so proactive, even down to yesterday, he was saying that they've got nothing else to clean in the hotel. So they started all over again. And it's about conveying that to the customer as well. On social media channels, it's so important now that we do that. You know, we need to do this digitally to show that we are, you know, emotionally connected with the guest, of course, but that we do take their safety and their concerns to heart. Because you know what? A hotel next door to me could be paying 40 quid and have a really bad cleanliness rating, or I could be it could be charging 100 quid and have a great rating. And the customer, of course, will go where they feel safe rather than value for money, which is the cheaper option.
Great. So do you think that it's going to be like, we're not going to press the pause button basically this summer during the RFP season, but it may be a change in looking at the strategy around corporate and maybe around the rate structure, for example, or?
I do think there's going to be an element of that, because there's been a lot of hotels in a lot of different parts of the world who've been charging extortionate money for a very long time, and they've been getting away with it for a very long time. I think it's more value add to the customer, value add to the booker, going forward than what it is in regards to just giving them a rate. You know, Carla mentioned yesterday when we had our chat that it needs to be a lot more tangible value, not just free Wi-Fi. You know, free Wi-Fi is a given. Everyone has it. You can get free Wi-Fi in the street now. You know, you walk around London, you've got O2 free Wi-Fi. So that's not a tangible, you know, upsell for a corporate now. So you need to be able to do something. And you know what? Sometimes room upgrades aren't even there anymore in a lot of properties. I think it physically needs to be something. I know Olga had mentioned this as well last week when we were talking about RFPs, because it did come up as a slight bit of a conversation between us all, and we all kind of, some agreed and some disagreed, which is great because we all have our own different mindsets when it comes to how we're going to deal with this.
Yeah, I agree, Christina. There is lots of valid points. I would say if companies are consenting to renegotiate RFPs, then probably they are looking for better value for money, not necessarily discount. And I think that's where the hotels will have to try to come up with better solutions rather than just reducing rates. Carla, you also mentioned a very interesting point in terms of companies will be looking at the different, what is important for them, what is not. To give our audience something a little bit, maybe some tips as well to take away from this conversation. What do you think will be more important? Like we know that travel, our first travel probably is likely to come back will be local business. Would you say that the car park, free car park included in the price point, will that be more important to them rather than, let's say, or maybe a drink voucher, you know, rather than upgrade, as we're saying? You know, everyone, it depends also on the type of hotel, of course. But, you know, what do you see right now will be becoming more important for the guests and for the companies as well?
Yeah, and I think you're right, Olga. I think it's going to come down to how well as a property you're set up for our new environment, because the first thing you need to think around is do I have a gym in my property? Is that going to be accessible by guests? How am I going to clean that? Yeah. Do I have co-working space? What's my restaurant capacity going to look like? So I think first of all, you need to get your own house in order and understand the spaces that you can utilize to empower that value add. I think some of the things that are really interesting that I've seen started to happen will be private transfers for those hotels more in the upscale space. So instead of kind of having an Uber from the airport or an Uber from your office, it's private transfers where you can kind of get a sense of security and safety. Boxed breakfasts versus, you know, dining in the restaurant. In-room dining on your DBB rates versus in your restaurant again. So I think there will just be modifications to the value adds that are in those rate plans, but you really kind of need to think around how it's now tailored for our new environment in the short term and then in the long term as well. So is social distancing, we know social distancing is going to be in place for at least the rest of this year. We don't know what's going to be happening in 2021, but there's going to be an evolution as well. So how do we start to evolve that strategy as well?
I think your point about breakfast, Carla, was quite an interesting one about, we've talked about fixed rates and dynamic pricing. And if you're taking away the breakfast element of your corporate rate and offering a to-go option, then it gives you more scope to negotiate and offer a better rate and almost use it as your kind of distress-based business to increase that market segment and for your corporate traveller. So there's a cost element there too for the hotel to work with. It's a bit easier.
Yeah, and I think definitely there's an opportunity for us to think beyond the room as well. So I just think about how I've travelled previously, and I do try and go to the gym despite my best efforts of avoiding it. So, you know, what's that gym environment going to look like? Would I be prepared to pay £10 an hour if they could guarantee me that I could have that gym to myself? I would probably pay, right? And if you can get 8 or 10 of those customers during the day for 30 minutes or 45-minute slots, that's some significant revenue over a couple of weeks. So I think we can be creative around how we utilize the rest of the space in the properties as well. Once we are comfortable that, you know, we can adhere to the safety regulations that customers are expecting from us.
It's going to be a lot about thinking beyond the room, as you said, and being a bit more creative, trying to look at what kind of offer we can really give to the guests, what are their needs, depending on your locations, obviously. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And so do you think it's going to be the end of flat rates? Are we going to go back to basic with like super flat rates, or is it going to be more dynamic? We actually have a question from Ina. Thank you, Ina. She's asking if blackout dates are a thing of the past also. So I guess we're into more of the pricing around that. Then how do we deal with that?
I don't know who wants to take that. Maybe one of the revenue revenue managers. I think personally, flat rates, fixed rates for me, I've really not been a big fan of them for a really long time. I don't think they help the revenue generation for the properties, and I think it alienates consumers and business travelers because they spend too much time shopping around. As soon as they see that that rate is out of parity against an OTA, they lose trust in their TMC and their corporate agent. So I think for me, I would say I'm a big advocate for moving away from fixed rates, and I'll stop there.
Carla, sorry, I won't be able to stop you there, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay.
So then maybe you've seen already other companies, or could be in other countries without specific names. What will be then solution to that? If we're moving away from flat rates, are we talking then certain percentage of discount from bar rates, or something else, or just added benefits, or moving more into consortia space? Then what is then the kind of alternative to that?
I think what's readily used at the moment, and kind of pulling on kind of the space I'm in at the moment in the channel management space, the way that we see hoteliers facilitate this today is a discount off best available rate with some added value included in it. Certainly then where we're running from the channel manager booking engines, there will be promo codes that are also kind of used as pseudo rate access codes in the same way they're used on the GDS, in order to create a closed environment for those business travelers who have a set program within a hotel as well.
And from your experience, corporate accounts are, because it's not necessarily historical setup, do you see corporate accounts kind of adjusting to this model quite easily? Do you see the benefit? I mean, as you said, they lost already trust, when they come across this parity issues. So is it a smooth process from their side? Is it welcomed?
I think it's definitely going to come down to the segment and the type of corporate or business you're servicing, and how tech savvy that company is as well. We've seen a huge evolution recently in terms of the movement towards corporate booking tools and self-booking tools. And I think that's empowered business travelers and the travel procurement managers within those businesses to understand better on what is behind the scenes of a travel management company. They can shop more freely, they can see the way that different hotels are acting against their policy requirements. So I think that's created some transparency in the business travel space. Does it open up gaps, or does it create challenges around the value propositions for TMCs? Potentially.
I just realized we didn't answer the question.
I think for me, blackout dates are gone. In my opinion, it's fair rates we should be offering to the guest anyways. Because if you put a blackout date, it inhibits the customer from seeing you, and it inhibits GDS from seeing you as well. You go dark on GDS if you've got a blackout date in there. So that's something you need to remember. I'm in favor of fair rates. You don't overprice your fair rates. You put in a rate that you believe is fair for the customer. We moved away as well, just to touch on the corporate flat rates. We moved away many, many years ago in Ireland, in a lot of cases, especially Dublin hotels, from being flat to dynamic. It's about how you explain it to the customer. And that's the biggest thing, is how you explain to the customer that, sure, during the summer, the rate is a little bit higher, but that's because we're in peak season. You are winning in the winter because you're still getting 20%, 30% off. And I think the one way to avoid the whole issue of parity with the customer is that if they find a lower rate online, so if I've got a corporate account with Google and they're sitting at 20% or 18% off bar because they give me a lot of revenue, if they find a cheaper rate through, something as if a meta search or, a B2B partner was selling cheaper, match it. Actually match that rate for that occasion. It's not going to kill you. It shows the customer and the booker that you were able to accept, oh yeah, hands up, it was our fault, we've done something, and you're not losing a client because they could go next door. We're now in a time where people are very fickle where they're going to go as well. They're going to go to the people that are going to give them A, the best rate, B, that's going to be completely secure for their people, and C, value adds. Simple.
Yeah,
transient. Everyone's speaking. But your transient business, I think that's relevant for, and then you've got your contracted, and for your contracted business, the relationship with your sales manager, which we talked about a few weeks ago, is the most important, because they will dictate and negotiate directly with your property individually and give you exactly what you need to grow that business.
And I think it's very key, Susan, to go back to your point, it's really key for sales manager to get the data from their revenue colleagues. Because once you've got this data, you put it in front of the customers and explain why you need to, maybe you're offering to do a fair rate instead of a blackout date. It's really, really powerful for the sales manager to actually win the business, because the customer is actually, it's making sense. You're selling a room and the data is really, really powerful. Just to go back to the fixed rates, I really have seen for the last few years, the corporate buyers really focusing on the top properties where they really have a larger volume, because they understood that the long trail of hotels where they got really small volume is no point to spend so much time negotiated for such a small volume. So I see this trend really carry on, and the corporate buyers will only focus on a handful of properties which are really, really strategic. So again, as the demand is going to be really smaller in the next few months, if GBTA is really pushing for holding rates, no, it's actually for the sales manager to go back to their clients and making sure that through the consolidation, your hotels stay preferred and negotiate the rate. And it could be an increase of rate, not necessarily holding.
Right. So we have a question from David, actually, quite challenging those comments. He's asking to the group, as occupancy levels have to build up from zero, is it really worthwhile time investment for RMs in 2020 to manage dynamic pricing and in general optimizing demand? And when the need is to focus on demand generation and collecting customer feedback, he thinks that I personally would establish simplified fixed rate per segment and possibly midweek and weekend. He's curious to hear about the feedback from the group.
I can see Suzanne shaking her head already. And I actually agree with what Suzanne's already about to say, because I can preempt what she's going to say. Yeah. A few weeks back, when the COVID hit London and Dublin, you could actually clearly see, and across Europe, everyone just slashed their rates to flat rates. You know, and a lot of systems overridden everything because there was an override in situ for these situations. I think we need to be flexing our rates. We need to be dynamic. I know we're going to be moving in tiny baby steps, but you can't let the basics of revenue management go. You're going back to 20 years ago when hotels used to have a flat rate of 80 quid, 60 quid, and not move beyond that. And then they'd actually stick to the government rules that you can only sell a certain amount. Them days are gone. And we're now about profitability, which is what we touched on last week and 2 weeks prior to that.
And it's in the interest of the customer as well to have a dynamic pricing, because yes, they may benefit from it at the beginning when the demand will be small. Yes, the prices are going to increase when the demand is going to get stronger, but fixed rate is a no-go for everybody. It's wrong for the customer and it's wrong for the hotel.
Just want to pick up on David's point about I agree with exactly what you've both said. I think absolutely we do not want to be going back to midweek and weekend rates. However, I think that stimulating demand is not done purely through price. So the point that David's making is a good question. And it takes us back again to that whole let's not work in silos, where marketing, revenue and ops should be working very closely together, really pushing every single bit of data, research, go through your filing cabinets, find old leads, do a full sales audit and start to really get amongst every bit of data. Old school, who remembers feed the lead? Collecting business cards, updating them, getting your sales manager on top of every single lead that comes in. That's how you stimulate your demand. It's not about just saying, well, here's your fixed price. Get together and get a plan in place.
Can I mention something? In David's question, he's talking about pricing also per segment in terms of simplified fixed rates. Now, it's still relevant for some market segments. There are still hotels working on with wholesalers, and most of the times those rates are fixed. The same, we just discussed corporate rates. These are the fixed rate. There might be some event seasonality rates in supplement, but there are still segments that this pricing potentially, it still changes throughout the year, but kind of, I don't necessarily agree with you fully. Maybe for retail market, yes, dynamic pricing is absolutely the way forward, but there are still some segments, even group pricing, the seasonal, the series, tour series, this is pretty much still fixed pricing. It changes to reflect the seasonality on the market, of course. Also, I would not completely say, I don't know which hotel David works for, but I think I would be quite careful to say, no, it's only dynamic pricing throughout all market segments. It still may be relevant for some properties.
But it really depends on your negotiated position. Are you given every single corporate rate, last room availability? How does your corporate rate structure look? Is it discounted from bar? Is it net? If you get a CR 1 to 10, is it scaled? There's lots of different ways to skin a cat, and it always comes back to your rate grid, which if it's not structured properly, you will get in a pickle very quickly.
Sure,
Structure
absolutely.
your rate grid.
No, absolutely. But it's two separate things. I'm not saying to not structure your corporate rates, but corporate rates are still fixed rates throughout the year.
I think it all depends on the business that you're having. And we hear that it's not as if you can from one day to another just change completely to a dynamic structure. It'd be great. It would be like RM's dream, basically. But there are some consensus basically to do with the sales team and of course with the clients. Vicky made a great comment actually, saying that that's the time where we need to really work and educate the sales also and work better together to make sure that we understand each other's and the long-term impact also, because here we're very much thinking about the short term and making sure that those corporates are coming back and how do we make sure that they come to our hotel and not next door if they give something more flexible or etc. But we need to make sure that we know that after a crisis, coming back to normal level is harder if you slash the rate or if you make too many compromises basically on your restrictions. So I think we need to be careful there.
And Bérangère, I would like to rebound on the question or the comment from Vicky regarding sales manager and revenue manager. Yes, Vicky, absolutely. I would recommend for any salesperson to go and sit down with their revenue managers and understand how do they work. If they have a revenue management system, you want to go and have a look how it works, because this will have an impact on your relationship with your clients. So do spend the time if you have not done it. And it will be very helpful for you to manage your relationship with your clients in the future.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, there's diversity, right? So I come from a background of revenue and operational management within hotels. I then went into sales. I've done various other roles since. That diversity of understanding is really powerful. So yes, it's around sales sitting with revenue. It's around revenue going out on sales calls with their sales manager. It's around us sitting with marketing teams and understanding marketing spend and strategies and how we can influence that. Ultimately, distribution strategy today isn't revenue's job, sales jobs, or marketing's job. It's a collaboration between the three divisions. And if we don't understand what each other are doing or our strategies or objectives, we'll never be able to achieve a single goal.
I think if you want some good ideas about what to do with your hotel, ask your reception team, the guys who are on the front desk, answering the phone, dealing with the guests every day. They're frontline salespeople, and they know what's going on in your business more than anyone sitting in an office does.
Yeah, I think as well, they're the people that need to get a lot of credit. And you're right, Suzanne, in sales, passing on leads to the revenue managers, sales managers, they don't get enough credit. The reception team, they can spot the regular clients that we will never see because we're sitting behind the office door. All we see is emails that come into us, or if we're checking reservations, the same name maybe a few times. If it sparks a memory with you, it just depends on the size of your property. You could have an 80 bedroom and you're able to see something really quickly, or a 500 bedroom and it just slips through the cracks.
I have a question to Carla. Can I just jump onto it, please? Carla, because of the high cost of acquisition for GDS normally, we historically have seen mid-scale and luxury properties usually using this as a channel. However, in the UK, at least in my experience, I've seen more budget hotels going into that place as well. Would you say it's a quite normal right now? And you seeing, because our audience is quite international, I would like to maybe have your knowledge and experience sharing information. Is it the trend we're seeing only in the UK, or potentially it is something that other hotels in other destinations should look into as a potential revenue generation?
Sure. So I'll probably just take a step back. I think And then definitely remind me if for some reason I don't answer your question. I think taking a step back, I think I've worked in the GDS space. I've worked for one of the big three, and I think there is definitely a perception that GDS is particularly expensive. I think GDS is expensive if you don't know how to manage it, if you're not utilizing it in the right way. And I think we need to be very clear if we understand the costs of direct acquisition as well as we should. So do we really understand how much marketing is spending on direct acquisition, what that cost is end to end to us, and do we even have the capabilities to understand that? I think GDS is still an expensive channel for what it gives us, but I think what we've seen is that there has been a rise in both small properties and large properties, luxury and budget, in taking a more sophisticated approach to distribution management. And taking a more distributed, more strategic approach essentially means you need more depth and breadth of distribution choice. So they're joining the GDS or they're joining other programs, consortia programs as example, to give them that choice so that they can day to day now manage what their distribution strategy looks like and execute it as quickly and as efficiently as possible. They just want options, I think is what we're seeing at the moment. I think the other thing that we've seen, taking it from more of a traveller perspective, is business travellers now have changed the way that they see their business travel. So I think business travellers are more educated now. They have a better understanding of the cost associated of their travel to their business, and they are sometimes making smarter decisions around where they will stay during their travel. Additionally, we've seen people even be incentivized for it. So there are corporate booking tools and self-booking tools out there who will incentivize you to save on your travel. So it's now become more relevant for budget properties to be present on the GDS, so that availability is there for TMCs and those booking tools.
Great, thanks, Carla. Maybe what I can offer is to take a tiny breather, so we let also the people listening to us ask some questions, and we come back in a few seconds to continue this topic.
Hola from Barcelona.
Hello from Berlin.
Hi from Dublin.
Hi from London.
Hello from Budapest.
HTC means fun, belonging, and a safe place.
It is your voice, it's encouragement, support and community.
Sharing knowledge.
Development, support, learning, and friendships.
It's for me inspiration, great network, and kick-ass women.
HTT means for us legacy for
future
generations.
Great, welcome back. So again, feel free to ask some questions on online, so we can answer any topics that you want. Carla, just coming back on your last comments, so you were saying that business travelers are going to look at at more options. I think we have a slide maybe we wanted to share here, showing the different distributions and where business traveler is coming from. And maybe is there going to be a change in this segmentation, you think? Are people going to look for different options or not? It'd be interesting to have all of you ladies, your view.
So you should be able to see this screen now, yeah?
Screen's not coming. It's okay. We're live, so we heard it. Right. So yeah, we've seen that it's quite a blurry world of business travel. There's, I don't know, very few hotels, to my knowledge, that are still asking, like, is it a business or for leisure that you're coming up? And sometimes it's actually a mix of both. But basically, GDS seems to be the main way. Like from Olga's questions before and Carla's answer, we can see that actually not necessarily all the time. So it'd be interesting to get some maybe figures on that. Even if you want to share some figures, that'd be great. Coming direct, coming from OTAs and wholesaler, is it Meta? Is it from TMC? So is there going to be a new distribution there? Should people really go into some specific distribution channel?
So I think from what we know, there's an industry kind of stat that's out there today that we know that GDS, from a hotel perspective, represents a very, very small percentage of the hotel bookings that are booked globally, so less than 2%. But that 2% very often is concentrated into certain properties. For example, they will be city centre properties. They tend to be within those chains and those groups. I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. I think there is a change in behaviour from the traveller from the businesses themselves and also the TMCs that they're looking for alternative options. And we've seen that even with the rise of the alternative accommodation homestay providers. So the rise of kind of Airbnb in business as an example. We're now seeing the TMCs wanting that content available for their travelers and for their businesses. So I definitely think there's going to be a shift. That evolution was happening prior to the crisis. Whether or not we see that extend even further post-crisis, I think will be yet to see. But honestly, I think if I was traveling for business and I was concerned about my safety, my security, then I would potentially think around an apartment versus a hotel, because I know that I would then have my own space, my own kitchen to prepare my own food, my own space to exercise, that kind of thing. But also at the same time, it brings into question how clean is that homestay? What regulations are in place? So I'm definitely on the fence. We'll see what happens in a couple of months.
Carla, I've got a question for you. With business travel being so blurry and a traveler maybe booking through an OTA or a Meta or whatever, or direct, what do you actually recommend your clients, the hoteliers, how can they manage to make sure that the same rates are actually applied everywhere?
That's a great question. You know, I think without feeling like it's a setup question, I think there are fantastic pieces of technology out there that really enable any hotelier, whether or not you're large, small, or a group, that really do enable you to make sure that you are managing your distribution. Now, I think we all have started to recognize that smart distribution is not necessarily about parity. It's around the right rate, the right value for the right segment at the right time. You know, you guys are revenue managers day to day. You know this much better than I do. But I think technology helps to facilitate that process. What technology doesn't do is it doesn't create the strategy. So we need people in place to create the strategy. Technology is there to help execute, manage, distribute, and to sell it. So I think my recommendation is make sure that you have a very clear strategy on where you want to be selling, why you want to be selling, who you want to be targeting. I'm sure you guys have kind of got recommendations and packs that you can help distribute for that. And then make sure that you've got the right tech partners in place that can help you to achieve your strategy. But unless you set an objective for what you want to do, you can never find the route, the journey, right? So you need to know your objective, then you can map out your journey and who's going to help you take there. There's not one single bullet that's going to help every hotel. Every hotel is going to have an individual strategy on how they approach it.
Carla, do you have information how much business on through GDS coming, how much of this is international, how much is domestic? Because we know that international business is likely to come back later, of course, after the domestic because of the travel restrictions still in place. And even that we come across stats that in China, in Abu Dhabi or Middle East, let's say, corporate travel is bouncing back already. However, when you look into it a little bit deeper, it's actually domestic business. So do you know what is the percentage through GDS in average approximately, just to give our audience a bit of understanding, how much, what is the split between the international and domestic market? And also how hotels can, in their local areas, how they can get a little bit more of that domestic market? Thank you.
Sure. And yeah, no worries. So I think there's a clear, so it's hard to generalize because it comes down to the GDS, which TMCs those GDSs are facilitating. But I think there's a clear kind of 80, 20, 90, 10 split for international travel. The reason being is that the GDS business is underpinned by its international air travel. So, and the attachment for those hotel bookings is attached to those air fares. So if we aren't traveling internationally, we don't have the attachment. So essentially that international travel will decrease. We won't see the bookings via GDS. That's a generalization though, because there are some GDSs out there that have TMC relationships with TMCs in country like the UK who service a lot of domestic business. So there are opportunities out there. I think the advice would be you have to do the analysis. I think you have to look at who your corporate bookers were, who were the TMCs that were facilitating that, understand from the corporations directly if they're going to be continuing to utilize their TMC relationships, because there's obviously a cost attached to it. But there's also a huge amount of duty of care that those corporations have to now deliver. to their travelers. So it's that now it's a really hard decision that those corporations now have to make between cost efficiency, cost of management, against duty of care for those travelers as well. My recommendation for capitalizing on more domestic business would be just get closer to your customer. And I think the recommendation there around kind of speaking to your front office staff, your front desk staff, is really key. That the best way for us to understand our business is to be out there operationally and understand that interaction. That might now mean that we go and speak to those corporate customers. We understand who and when they're going to start to travel, which offices will be coming back, who are we going to be servicing. So, it may be the case that the CEO might be traveling and then the core staff will be traveling, but any of that kind of middle management, that's not essential travel anymore. They won't be traveling. So, certain brands will see an uplift and some won't. Just getting closer to your customer, I think.
That's really encouraging for independent hotels, isn't it? Because the distribution space, consortia, preferred partnerships, it can seem quite like a dark art to the independent hotelier. So I'm really encouraged to hear that actually, back to old school again, get close to your customer, make it about sales, everyone get together and talk about it is just really insightful and encouraging.
I think as well with the distribution and making sure that people get, it's the right price at the right time, as Carla said. We all know this. We've been preaching it from our pulpits for a long time. But it's also knowing your distribution channels, who's going to deliver business to you. And GDS can be expensive, but you know what? It can also be really, really good, and it can work really well for properties. So maybe it's something that we all need to, start stepping up on, checking our GDS, making sure we link in with people who can check our GDS for us. If you haven't had GDS checks done on your property for a long time, reach out to someone. We all know someone who works in a travel agent somewhere who's able to get a check done to see where your position is. And, the one thing I've learned through the years is having your locations is key. These are the little markers that the likes of the tour operators are putting in, London, Kensington, all these little abbreviations. Ask people, because these tags will bring you up even further on your search and your content as well. Because we all forget when we're updating our content on Booking.com, Expedia, and all our partners, who do we always forget? GDS, because we don't understand it. You're right, Suzanne. It is actually a dark art for a lot of people. A lot of people don't understand GDS or know how it works properly or how we can update that channel in particular.
One thing I would just add, and it's a good tip, is ask your GDS provider to print off your HOD pages and get them checked. I mean, that is just the first place to start. And it's like old-fashioned CFAX. Go through the detail like you said, Christina.
Could I ask Carla kind of the final question for me? Just understanding a little bit of, because the GDS space was split between three main companies. As I understand, the main revenue stream for those platforms are actually fares or airlines, because right now planes are grounded. This means that right now there will be less income for them in. Are we likely to see change in that split of the market? Are we likely to see some massive disturbances happening in that space? What's your prediction, Carla?
So you're completely right. The revenue driver for all of the three big GDS players is their airline revenue. I think the ability for them to pivot very quickly into new revenue streams will be limited, but can they lean into other revenue opportunities potentially? I don't think that will necessarily be in the hospitality space and the hotel space. I think what they'll probably do is start to lean into ground transportation. So an area that they've been trying to unlock for a really long time is kind of trains, kind of on-demand car services, as well as car rental. So I think they'll probably start to lean into those services and try and service the transportation to the properties rather than lean heavily on the airlines. I think another area that has been discussed for a very, very long time within the GDS distribution space and the airline distribution space is the new NDC regulations. So I think they will be spending this time really doubling down on development in the NDC space and making sure that they now have better connectivity with airlines, that they can distribute content in the right way for airlines, and that they can access some of the low-cost carriers. So the reason why the international travel was so prevalent for the GDSs is because they were working with the large carriers. what NDC allows them to do is to have better agreements with those low-cost carriers who typically are servicing those domestic routes. So I think my prediction would be they won't necessarily lean into the hospitality space, but it will be the ancillary sales that are around it.
Great, interesting. Thank you very much, Carla. So I think it's a wrap for today, unfortunately. But we've got some really interesting thoughts, I think. It seems that RFP season is not really dead, that there's still some work to be done actually on corporate business and working together with sales to really make sure that you have the right structure, that you really understand the needs of your customer and have the right offer to give. And then it's all about finding the right channels. There seems to be some opportunities with GDS, so I think something that we need to really dig a little bit further probably, but also not to forget the other channels obviously that are well, sometimes a little bit less obvious actually, so that we need to work on. Thank you very much, Carla, for joining us for this session. That was really great. Next we should talk about more of the leisure market actually. So I hope to see you there with us next week.